Welcome to Sew Very Easy. My name is Laura, and it is the end of January, and I thought maybe it'd be fun to make something that maybe could be used for Valentine's Day. And if you don't want to do it for Valentine's Day, you might want to do it if you happen to love roses and chocolates. So if you like roses, this line from Benartex is great. It's called True Romance. It has tone-on-tone roses, beautiful big red roses. We can get a nice green to go with those leaves. And yes, we can definitely get chocolate to go with that. Now, if this is not enough chocolates or roses, there are more in that fabric lineup. We have the dark versions with chocolates and roses, some chocolate dipped strawberries, some nice bright tone-on-tone roses, boxes of chocolates, beautiful red roses on black. There's lots to choose from. And there's a lot of beautiful coordinates that will go with that line. So I'm going to make a square 42-inch quilt. I thought that would be nice on a table, on a bed, put it on a couch, somewhere to celebrate beautiful roses and maybe even that Valentine's Day. I would recommend cutting all of your pieces first, and I will put a cutting list in the description. The quilt consists of 4 big hearts in the middle and some rosebuds on the outside. So let's start with our big hearts, nice big pieces. We have piece K. We need 4 of them, and they're 4.5 inches. We have piece L, and they are the multiple colored roses. They're also 4.5 inches. The multiple roses M, and they're 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches. And some little end pieces. They're 1-inch squares, and we are going to need 8 of them. So we're going to be able to sew these 2 pieces together and press that seam to the dark side using that 1/4 inch. And when we do that, they are going to match up beautifully to that 8.5 inch piece. To finish off these heart blocks, we're going to put 2 cornerstones on the end. And that's going to give it a heart shape. Now I've chosen 1-inch squares, but you can do 2-inch if you'd like. We're going to match the right sides down in that corner and stitch from corner to corner. And then we're going to be able to fold that back, press it, and trim off the seam allowance. When we do that, it turns this more into a heart shape. And that's all we're going to need to do to make those 4 blocks, so we can put them aside while we make some rosebuds. The rosebuds are going to start off the same way as those hearts, just a little bit of a smaller version. We're going to make 4 of the darker blocks and 8 of the light pink blocks. The background fabric was cut at 2.5 inches, and we do need 12 of those, and I labeled them A. The darker color, we need 4 of each, 2.5 inch. I did label this C, 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch, and I labeled that B. For the light pinks, 8 at the 2.5 inch, I labeled them C, and B, 2.5 inch by 4.5 inch. And we're going to start by sewing those together exactly the same way as we did the hearts. But this time we're going to turn them into roses. Once those little rosebuds are done, we're going to do the stems. The stems are going to start with a background fabric cut at 5.5 inches, and we do need 12, and a stem. And the stem is going to be cut at 1 inch by 7.5 inches. To make the stem block, what I need to do is cut the background fabric in half on the diagonal. These little pieces are going to be stitched right inside. So we're going to be able to match up that thin piece right along the edge that we cut from corner to corner. The little tips are just hanging out ever so slightly. We're going to be able to trim this down, so we just need to approximately line that up and stitch. Once that first piece has been stitched on, press it so the seams are going towards this green. Now that this is pressed, it's going to be really easy for us to look at the right side and the right side and just match them up. So we're going to be able to see if that point matches up and the edge match up. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. We will be trimming this down. From here, take that seam and press it to the center. So the block will look like it's rejoined and we have a nice little stem in the front. These are bias seams, so the block is probably stretched a little bit, so we're going to be able to trim those all down to 4.5 inches. And that will match the rosebud blocks. If you have a 4.5 inch ruler, that really does work out nice. We now have 12 stems. Now we need 2 leaf blocks. And if you follow me, you'll know that I don't do things the traditional way, and this is one example. To make those leaves, we are going to need the background fabric and the leaf fabric. So for the leaf fabric, we're going to need 12 of these cut at 3.5 inches. I did label them F. We have a small background, 2.5 by 3.5. This is E. We have a Q, it's 2.5 by 5.5, and a 5.5 inch square. We need 12 of each of these pieces. And just like the rosebuds and the hearts, we're going to sew these together. As you're stitching the leaves together, it doesn't matter if this longer piece goes on the right or the left. It will not make a difference. For this block, I do like to press those seams open so that the block is nice and flat. We're going to turn this block into a half square triangle. We need our background fabric so we can match those up together. So we have the 2 right sides touching. We need to draw a line from this corner down to this corner. This is going to be a cutting line, so you can use whatever you need to see those lines. And you don't have to worry about matching up that center point exactly. We are going over, so that center point is not important. It, however, can give you a little bit of a reference point. So now, just like a half square triangle, we're going to stitch down both sides. Once that's stitched, we're going to cut it in half between those stitching lines. Now when I open it up, I have one block that has a full piece on one side and the half square triangle. And on the other piece, it's kind of hard to see, but I do have that 2 piece in this block and that 1. But this is going to give us 2 beautiful leaves. So we can press those seams to the white side. We're going to be able to trim those all down to 4.5 inches. We can use that center measurement as a guide and put our ruler down and trim, and it really doesn't matter the size of that leaf. If we need to use a bigger ruler, we could start with that 45-degree line down that center line, do the 2 sides, flip, and do the other 2. So when we're done this one square with the 2 half square triangles, it gives us the left and right leaf. So we can see that they're different. So no matter how you turn them, they are going to be different, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So I like to keep my pairs together. So for each little rosebud block, we're going to need the rose. We will need a stem. And we are going to need 2 leaves. So those bigger triangles are going up towards that rose block. So we're going to be able to sew those 2 together and then sew those right together. That's going to give us a really pretty rosebud. We will have 4 in the darker color and 8 in the lighter color. You can see how easy it was to make those leaves this way. We did not have to do any set-in seams, and we have that beautiful point. We have our heart blocks done, our rosebuds done. Now let's put together a corner or a quarter of the quilt. So to put these 4 corners together, we are going to use some sashing pieces. Our sashing pieces are made with that background fabric, and they're piece number S, 2.5 inches by 8.5 inches. So we're going to get 4 of each of those and put them together with some cornerstones. And those cornerstones are J, and they're cut at 2.5 inches. So here are our 4 corners. This shape is going in the same direction, and our rosebuds are going opposite. We're going to sew those together. We're going to sew them with these big hearts in the center. So we're going to need to add some more sashing. I would suggest when sewing these together, we make this one unit, and we're going to make that twice, put them together, and then we're going to have one long strip we're going to be able to make. So we're going to have the longer pieces with those cornerstones and join them all together. And that's all there is for the center of the quilt. The last thing we need to do is add a border. For the top and the bottom, we're going to cut our border strips at 2.5 inches by 38.5 inches. For that side, we're going to need to cut them 2.5 inches by 42.5 inches. This will now equal 42.5 inches. If you want a little larger, by all means, add a bigger border. Here is that printout that I have been referring back to. Now I did add the cutting for the binding in that green, but of course you can always change that. And it does have a great picture here that you can refer back to. True Romance is now done. If I was to do it again, I definitely would add larger white squares there in the corner. 2 inches, maybe even 3. Though I still have that general look that I am wanting. I have rosebuds pointing in, and those rosebuds pointing out give that a little bit of an arrow shape, so it sort of has a secondary pattern involved in it. The fabric is a new line by Ben Artex, and it is called True Romance. So if you're looking for it, you'll be able to find that in your stores. In the description, I will put this handout so that you can follow along if you're interested in making True Romance. And thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and I do have a newsletter. It's all free under Sew Very Easy. And be sure to make every day a Sewtacular day. Happy Valentine's Day. Bye for now.